Hey, Professor. My name is Anthony Cockley, and I'm one of the students who worked on the Butterfly Garden project this summer. So I wanted to just take some time to discuss this. I wanted to use my voice. I feel like uh, typing on the PowerPoint is good and all, but I really wanted to express, some of my opinions vocally, you know. so, yeah. I mean, to begin, I thought it was a really awesome time. I really enjoyed being able to work on this project. I did think it was you know, kind of sad that I didn't get to be there in person, but given the circumstances, I totally understand, that decision. Um, I personally agree with it because, I have been a little bit skeptical about everything that's been going on, and I've just been kind of nervous. So I totally understand that. But, regardless of that, it was very awesome to be able to work on this project. So I wanted to just take the time to discuss it a little bit. So, to begin, basically, FGCU Food Forest. What is it, and what are the goals, and how are they achieved? So, basically, in my own words, I would say that the goals of the Food Forest are really to have sustainable growing practices for crops. Food that basically is organic, it's healthy, it's price price point, it's effective. It's something that's profitable, or well, I wouldn't say profitable, but you're not losing tons and tons of money trying to do this. And the other thing is, um, it has a community effect. It's a butterfly effect. So basically, the food forest grows this food, this organic food, and they do so with sustainable practices. And they provide this food to students and to the university in order to provide more healthy alternatives to, let's say, more traditional ways of growing food and obtaining food. You know, so this sustainable way, it's done at the food forest. So basically, everybody knows what's going into this food. If they're, it's organic, but like if there were any pesticides, you'd know. Everybody knows what's being done to these plants, but it's done in a sustainable way. So, I think that's really awesome, and I think that the community can learn a lot from that, which is where I think the butterfly garden really comes into play. So, um, for me, the butterfly garden was one of two things. So, first, butterflies can be considered pollinators, although they're not really strong pollinators. I learned that throughout this project. They are their morphology is different than a bee, of course. A bee is a really strong pollinator because of its short legs. They're very low down, so when they actually go into a male plant and they get all of the pollen on them, it's because they're so small. Butterflies have longer legs, and they don't necessarily have to really wriggle themselves up into the plant in order to obtain nutrition. Uh, their legs do get some pollen on them, which is why they can be considered a pollinator, but just like I said, not really a strong one. So while they could be utilized at the food forest to pollinate some crops, um, I saw it more on the side of community. So for me, what that really looked like was the butterfly garden to me has always been something that whenever I hear about one, like for example, when I went to the botanical gardens of Naples, I heard that they had a butterfly garden, and that was one of the first things I wanted to see. It just captures the imagination of a lot of people, and it's really just fun, and it feels almost mystical to walk through these awesome butterflies that might even take the chance to land on you. So I think that it's going to really grab the community's attention, and that will invite more people who might not really consider learning about sustainable growing practices, but they will consider the butterfly garden. And then while they're there, they'll be able to learn a thing or two about sustainable practices, about the plants that are raised inside the garden, about the butterfly species that are there and their nativity to Florida, and hopefully we'll be able to attract people that are like-minded and will definitely want to learn more about sustainable growing practices in the future and sustainable food production, because it is very important, and that is the mission behind the food forest. So I think that there needs to be a reason behind this butterfly garden, and I think that's one of the strongest reasons, is just getting the community more involved and being able to inspire people to really get this idea of sustainable growing practices in their mind. So I think that's awesome, and that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed working on this project, was because I felt like even though I wasn't there in person, I was still putting together this huge list of butterflies and plant species that were important, and I drew up a little design. I drafted the design of the butterfly garden that could serve as a reference, and I included some local artwork or artists that could possibly provide artwork to the butterfly garden, and I tried to envision this as a project bigger than myself and something that really was going to impact the community in such a bigger way, which is what I think is really awesome. And I think that, that is one of the biggest things. And so to kind of segue into that, I would like to discuss what I did personally for the project and, my contributions to it. So to begin, I did this in a PowerPoint format because I thought it would be the easiest way to kind of categorize things and show off the information. And, I'm notorious for making very lengthy PowerPoint slides, so I did try and focus on compacting the information and really highlighting things in a very friendly way. So to start, I did the butterflies. So I wanted to focus on butterfly species that were native to Florida because realistically, bringing species from far away just isn't as cost effective, and it's also just not right because the butterflies will more than likely die within 1 year because they won't be able to make it through a certain season depending on what their traditional climate is. So I focused on native butterfly species of Florida. All of the ones listed are pretty local from what I could see. I did heavily rely on one website that provided me with that information because that website listed their host plants, it listed the species, and it only focused on butterfly species native to here. And then I also found some awesome facts about them and just some unique things about their appearance. But to focus heavily, I wanted these native butterflies. I think they all would cooperate very well with each other. Of course, each individual butterfly is different, so it would have to be monitored, but I think that they would be very well with each other. Then I wanted to focus on the plant species that would be required for these butterflies because the larvae of butterflies are pretty particular in what they need in order to undergo metamorphosis and turn into a butterfly. So there's host species, and then there's host plants, and they have their food plants, and they also have the attracting plants. So for us, I wanted to really focus on those host plants for the larvae because those are the necessity. And some of the butterflies do also rely on those plants when they're adults, but other plants could be, of course, incorporated, but I really wanted to focus on what was necessary because without those plants, the larva would never survive. They wouldn't be able to make it through. So I wanted to give those plants. And what I found was most of them, except for, let me see here. What was the name? The yellow thistle, which I've seen it in person and it is kind of pretty when it flowers, but most of them actually have a very nice appearance when they flower. So they would be very desirable in the garden. It wouldn't be a plant type that you would look at and be like, these plants actually look very beautiful and I think they would fit the garden very well. And some of them, like the firebush, are located right on campus. So, they could be relocated or transplanted over into the garden, with little cost. And, or you could just regrow a piece of it and put that in the garden and have firebush, so that I thought was very cool. So yeah, focusing on that, then I focused on the butterfly garden design, which I tried to do in pen because that's what I did in my engineering class in high school. I wanted it to serve as a reference point because there's a lot of different ways that the garden could go. I wanted mine to be like some of the key features that a butterfly garden really needs. So while my butterfly garden might be rectangle, the actual design could be a square. It could be a triangle if that's what was really wanted. But I think the most important things are the doors, because the doors serve as kind of like a segue into the garden, a safe segue into the garden. So that way butterflies can't escape when people enter, and that way they're kind of contained within the garden's limits.